Hi, everybody.
Oh, we're recording already. Hi. I didn't see the little button. All right. Welcome. Tamara, why don't you kick us off? Tell us what you like about in development.
Sure. Microsoft Teams. Start a Teams chat with distribution grip or group,
This is
your
going to be a
choice.
great session.
Mail enabled security groups or an O365 group. So now you're going to be able to start a Teams chat with a distribution group, mail enabled security groups, or an O365 group. And be aware this feature will respect the limits on members of groups in a chat, which is currently set to 250. So if you have a really big distribution group, not going to be of help for you. But this is rolling out to DoD, GCC High, Worldwide, and GCC in June.
Cool.
That's good. I hope they give you a warning. I hope they give people a warning when it's
Like
a
you are
large
the
group.
limit. Yeah.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope so. Otherwise, people are going to get annoyed with it, but we'll see. We'll see. What do you like, Tom?
So a couple of ones that pop out to me, and I've got other ones too, but I'll just restrict to two right now. SharePoint improvements in SharePoint pages authoring. So column reflow and RSS connector web parts.
Yeah.
So if you have a two-column section, there's there's not issues. The way that things reflow if you have a really thin screen or stuff like that can like take the two section into a single section and do everything vertical. And if you have a horizontal, or I'm sorry, a vertical section and the flow goes down, or the flow goes down the screen, basically what they're going to be doing is changing that to give you more control over whether it actually goes to a single column, how it actually flows. So you'll get more, I think, fidelity for what the page looks like rather than having it completely change the layout of your page if you're using two column stuff on a narrow screen. They're also changing the RSS connector web part that's going to give more control to the users around the number of publications shown at a time and the number of articles shown per publication. So again, that'll give you a little bit more control on the RSS side. And then one more, Microsoft Teams, on-demand caption and transcript generations for supported languages. So it used to be just the typical English, maybe Spanish, stuff like that. But now they're going to be like Canadian English, Indian English, Kingdom English, Australian English, New
I
Zealand
thought,
English.
yeah, I like how there's like 9 Englishes at the
Yeah,
start.
I was like,
The
okay,
English flavors.
is it the
There's
term
a whole bunch of
food? I
other
don't
ones
know.
too, but it starts with like 9 versions of English.
Yeah. So there's a lot of other things, Japanese, French, Spanish, so on and so forth. So if that's something that you're used to doing, you're going to be able to get that on-demand captioning show up in different languages. So keep in mind that that is coming up in June.
Very cool. Very cool.
I'm sorry.
Um,
Yeah, June. I'm sorry. That's October. I scrolled up inadvertently. Expect that in October. So
cool. All right. So a couple of things for PDFs. Microsoft Forms. You can convert a Word or PDF quiz into Microsoft Forms. This is going to be really big for teachers out there who have probably a lot of quizzes and stuff like that in PDF or Word.
I
And
think
then,
that one is really interesting because I've tried the one where it will take like a form and you can then feed it into Power App and it will generate the form in Power App for you. I'm not overly impressed with that. I think Forms has a better, this is what it's going to look like. So I'm really curious to see what this looks like when it comes out.
I think forms and quizzes are a lot simpler
Yeah,
than a Power App. There's a lot more logic in a Power App, and there's a lot
exactly.
more. What are you trying to do in a Power App? I think a quiz is a quiz, like
Right.
questions, answers. It's going to be a lot, I think, simpler. So I think it's a lot easier. You kind of get what you
Yeah,
get. So I think
I
that will
agree.
be a really good tool for classrooms. And then you can also edit it. So I think that's good afterwards. Microsoft Teams, I think there's going to be a lot of admins that are excited about this one because they can stop hearing about it. But admins can set Adobe Acrobat as the default app in Teams to view and edit PDF files by Microsoft Teams. So I think people will be excited to see that change coming. So those are two that I saw in there that I think are good things coming. So how about you, Adam? What do you see that you like?
Yeah, there's a couple fun admin things that they basically added to the roadmap this week. I'll look at a couple that particularly kind of hopped out to me because there's stuff that I'll actually use with some of our customers. So one of the ones that I really liked was the idea of support for DKIM domain is what they call sending infrastructure for spoof intelligence management. Without getting too deep into what's going on here, basically you're going to be giving an option to do DKIM verified domains as a sending infrastructure, which will basically be on tenant allow block list spoofing. So basically security admins can go in, and if you have situations where you have a domain that's sending from multiple different locations, one of which being Office 365, you can now basically set up your Office 365 to do DKIM verified sending. And even though that is different from what you may have for like your pointer record or your IP subnet that would typically be sending from the other locations, you can still basically verify that it is a valid domain and what you're doing matters. So basically giving more options for customers that have a complex sending mechanism for their system that includes Office 365. It gives you more abilities to kind of custom handle that as a security admin, which is just a nice thing to do. And then a couple other ones too. One of the ones that hopped out to me was data purge capabilities for Microsoft Teams content, which is specifically for GCC and DoD roadmaps. Basically, the idea, if you want to go in on Microsoft Teams and actually purge out sensitive or maybe misplaced data, you'll have the processes to go through and do that properly, like actually fully remove it and fully remove it from e-discovery if you have a legitimate reason to do so. Now, it will track that you've removed the data, but you can still get the data removed. And then also the idea of doing Office 365 message encryption, which is giving you what they call Microsoft Information Protection Advanced Message Encryption. And basically, this will now track external user activities when they are going in and getting a message that's encrypted to them. So you'll have better logging. Again, this is in the government clouds, but you'll have better logging when you send an advanced encrypted email to other parties or documents. You will have tracking of what those people that you send it to access and what they view. It makes them, it ties their email address to their actions of going through and logging in to see the content, which is just better logging, which will obviously come into play with a whole bunch of the different compliance regulations that you're seeing related to the government clouds in the first place. So really nice to see that. That's definitely going to make logging better and auditing better as a whole. It will be relevant for a lot of my clients. So happy to see that they're continuing to develop and update that as we go on.
Cool. Anything else, Tamara?
I had one thing, and that was friendlier link names will now work for files added to messages through the attach icon. So link to files attached to a message from cloud locations connected to Outlook on the web will be displayed as a link in the body of the message instead of cloud attachments. And the link will have the name of the file. I think this is going to make it so much clearer as to whether or not it's a link to a document or an attached document. Because I've had so many people send me documents that are actually links and I don't have access to their environment, so I can't get to the document. And then I have to write back, could you please send me an attachment? Blah, 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 blah. So this is coming out in July.
So I've got a couple. So these are both Microsoft Teams. One is suggested replies in group chats. So in regular individual chats, a lot of times you get the little suggested replies, 3 little buttons at the bottom that you can click on. It'll give you the 1 or 2 word response in that. That's now rolling out to the group chats. So you're now going to be able to see that. That should be out in September, and that looks like it hits. That hits everything, worldwide, GCC, High, GCC, and DoD. And then text predictions for Teams Mobile. When you compose a reply to a message in Teams, editor text predictions anticipates your writing and suggests a suitable word or phrase online. This saves time and helps you avoid or reduce typos. This will be September, and that's rolling out to GCC, High, and DoD. And again, anything that makes typing less laborious in mobile has my vote.
Laborious. Awesome. Well, there's nothing else really for me. Adam, you have anything, or Tamara or Tom, anything else?
I'm good.
Awesome. Well,
Yep.
Tamara, why don't you take us into rolling out? What is rolling out
Sure.
that is got your goat? What do you love?
I am so excited. Microsoft Teams pairing the channel and the corresponding SharePoint folder name. So this feature has been updated to reflect new timing. When renaming a Teams channel, the corresponding SharePoint folder will be renamed and reflect the new name. This will help create consistency across Microsoft 365 endpoints, making it easier on the users to find their files from anywhere. This new feature will be available for all standard and private channels. For standard channels, the corresponding folder in the SharePoint will be renamed. For private channels, corresponding site name and folder in the SharePoint will be renamed. So for legacy Teams channels that were renamed prior to the rollout, there will be no change in the experience. When a legacy channel is renamed after this release, it will simultaneously rename the corresponding SharePoint folder. This feature has been updated to reflect new timing, which is June 2022.
It seems like that's been promised for like a year or more. I keep looking for it. It never seems to be the case. So I'm glad it's finally making its way out.
Yeah, so that's what's got me very excited.
Cool. I see one out there that I think everybody should be aware of for Office apps. Microsoft Office default change in terms of blocking VBA macros and files from the internet. So if you are getting a file from the internet as opposed to internal, it's going to start throwing security messages when you try to use any particular spreadsheet that has macros in it to let you know, hey, this could be a security risk. Here's why. Click here to learn more. So just keep in mind that if you're using spreadsheets and you've never had a problem and all of a sudden you start seeing pop-ups for security messages, that's what this particular one is. And click on the learn more to figure out what you need to do to get those to work going forward.
Now, this is one that is coming out, but it has to be turned on by IT admins. So this means that if you're in this environment, you have to figure out how it's getting configured in your environment. So this is GCC High, GCC, and DoD. And this says channel owners can delete meeting chat messages within channel meetings for government clouds. So currently you cannot delete meeting chat messages or anything like that. Once it's there, it's there. But what this says is they're rolling out a policy that says an IT admin can turn on a policy that says owners can delete sent messages. That's policy. And so IT admins can turn on and assign this message policy to a user or group of users, but it has to be applied before channel site owners can see an option for owners can delete sent messages. And that's going to be then an option that they can set on the member's permission through manage Teams settings. So if it's enabled, those who are assigned through the policy will be permitted to delete chat messages in the main window and in the meeting window. So that's going to be something that's coming, but it's going to be all based on how your tenant is configured. So that would be something you're going to have to work with your IT department to figure out how is it going to get configured and what policies are they going to set on it. So if you're in GCC, H, and DoD, that's all going to be dependent on the compliance and what they have to set for it and who's going to have those policies to do it, but something to look into. Before it wasn't possible, now it's going to be possible within the guidelines that they let you. So
Yes.
that's coming. Maybe for you that's coming.
There was one kind of nerdy email feature that I'll give a shout out to just because in the past I've had to deal with this problem, so having a solution to it is cool. Similar to Tamara's release, this is for June of this year, which is now basically, so it's in the process of rolling out, kind of makes sense, but they're calling it Exchange Online Protection Customizable Authenticated Receive Chain Configuration, which is ARC for short. So
that's a mouthful.
Customized Authenticated Received ARC chain. So customized authenticated receive chain. Anyways, when you're going through and looking at what it basically means, how you normally authenticate mails in modern day email is with SPF, DKIM, and DMARC. That's the accepted standards. There's some new ones that are coming out, but that's the default of what people go through and do. Well, in certain situations, sometimes organizations have legitimate reasons to have intermediary steps between sender and receiver. So I've had to deal with customers that, for instance, maybe are using Proofpoint and like to do that as their mail hygiene that's going on before it gets to 365, just because they haven't set up Exchange Online Protection. So they have it set up so that all their mail goes to Proofpoint and from Proofpoint goes to 365. Well, any of the security mechanisms that you're then turning on for 365 are worthless because it's always coming from the same hop before it gets to you. And stuff like DKIM and DMARC and stuff like that turned on the Office 365 layer wouldn't work. Now you could still do that at Proofpoint, but on 365 layer, none of that would be accurate. Similarly, I've had customers that have had stuff where they have like a partner they're working with that has a third-party program that does email signatures, where when people send off, they send the message, it goes to this other application server that puts in customized email signatures that are fancy and have stuff that they want before it sends the messages out. But then again, it's not coming from the actual mail servers where those people actually host their mail. It's coming from this third-party application that does these fancy signatures. And so when you have situations like that, sometimes it can mess with your security screening of what you're doing in SPF and DKIM and DMARC and stuff like that. Well, the idea of adding these customizable authenticated receive chain configurations is you're basically going to have the ability to identify intermediaries inside of the chain process that are okay, but still stay true to DKIM, DMARC, and SPF. And so basically you'll be able to look further back in the chain of what you're going through and doing, because typically when you're trying to do something like DKIM, you're going through and looking for a stamped envelope on the outside of the email and then verifying, okay, is the server that handed off to me the ones that has the stamped email? Or SPF, you're looking, is the server that handed off to me the one that has the record associated in their DNS profile? Well, again, this will basically allow you to have those intermediary third-party steps, but still be able to say, yes, no, this is a legitimate email. It passes the security checks that I need, stuff like that. So for most people, this won't ever be a thing. But for the people that do have it, this is basically a reassurance of getting that security authentication validation that right now you just literally can't get. So nice to see.
Cool.
Very cool. Tamara or Tom, you have anything else in rolling out?
The only other thing in rolling out is disabled chat write access for anonymous and unauthenticated users. I really think if you're going to put something in a chat, you should back it up with your name. So I like this. I don't like that it doesn't let anonymous or unauthenticated users participate in the chat. But I kind of like the idea that if you're not going to put your name behind it, you're not going to put it up.
Yeah, I wish we could read the chat, just not write in the
Right.
chat. That would be the hard
Right.
thing, because a lot of times I'll present in those meetings, and I'd like to be able to read the questions, even if I
Yep.
can't write back. But I get what they're trying to do there.
Yeah.
It'd be nice if they could say the following users cannot see the chat.
Right.
Yes.
Tom, do you have anything else in this section?
Just a couple real quick ones, both from Microsoft Teams, both dealing with chat bubbles. You're now going to be able to see in your meetings, you'll see the chat bubbles on both Android and iOS devices. Again, this kind of gives you more ability to use your real estate more effectively instead of having to have a chat, panel open. If you're used to seeing chat bubbles in your regular Teams meetings when you're on your computer, now you're going to be able to see those if you're joining the meeting in an iPhone or an Android device.
Cool. Well, Adam, I'm going to pass it over to you for the rest of the show, because we have launched and canceled, and there are 2 items, and they're all yours, my friend. So take it away.
Not too excited as a whole. As Jen kind of just mentioned, we literally only have one thing in launched and one thing of canceled. They are both admin features, though. So the one feature that we have in launch is M365 Compliance Center, Microsoft Purview, endpoint data loss prevention, app groups, and granular app restriction policies. This is basically just a feature that lets admins define endpoint DLP policies to lock specific apps for different activities. So it basically lets you get a little bit more granular on individual apps for what you want to allow your users, or specifically your endpoints, but what you want to allow the applications to do on the devices that you're managing. Basically just gives you, it gives admins a little bit more granular control of the applications they're managing themselves. And the one item that's been removed was removed simply because it was a duplicate. So it doesn't matter too much, but just know that it was a duplicate item that was related to Purview, but because it's a duplicate, it's still going to be on there and you're going to be fine.
Very cool. Well, that is our show for the week. We will be back next week with more updates. I kind of expected the roadmap to get a big cleanup, but it didn't. So I guess we'll see next week if we get the big yearly purge. But if not, we'll kind of keep rolling with it and see what happens. But we'll be back next week with another show. Is the last show of the Microsoft fiscal this year. So we'll see what happens. So we'll see everybody next week.
Bye, everyone.
Bye,
Have a
everyone.
good one.